Facebook, Instagram, and all of our social media platforms. Tonight we have our guest, Carol J. Williams. She is a Amazon #1 bestseller. Her book is titled Moving and Being Productive in the Midst of Loss. Tell us about yourself and why you penned this book.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ellen, for this opportunity. I am so excited to have this opportunity. I do appreciate you. So I'm Carol J. Williams. I am the founder of Moving and Being Productive in the Midst of Law. And moving and being productive, well, let me tell you about myself. So I am by profession, I'm a registered nurse. I actually am an advanced grief recovery method specialist certified by the Grief Recovery Method Institute. I'm also an elder at my church. Shout out to my church, House of Healing, in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Um, I wear I wear many hats. I'm an author of several other books. Um, I am just compassionate about helping grieving individuals on their journey. I wrote Moving and Being Productive in the midst of loss um, due to my mom dying in 2006 and having multiple losses, and wanted to just share my story as well as provide some educational moments just to encourage people that grief does not have to be doom and gloom, and that even when it feels like you cannot move or even let alone be productive, moving is possible. And being productive is even possible, even as you're on your grief journey. So I wrote the book because I wanted individuals to understand that their journey is different, but at the same point in time, that you definitely can move and experience productivity. Hence, moving and being productive, the book itself is a great testament to me actually being able to move while actually grieving.
I said on I was on Amazon Live and also presented your book as one of my on my top 20 lists. And so I got a chance to tell Cyrus, who is was the host, that while reading your book, I had no idea that I would experience loss again. Not only did I lose my nephew, but his sibling was the year after him. So while reading your book, I was able to understand that grief, um, the anger that we have, the Lord let me know that it doesn't belong to us to give that to Him, because sometimes we can grieve unhealthy, but you should have some healthy grieving. And I know that might sound difficult to others, but there is a such as healthy grieving, which you say so as well.
Repeat that, Alan.
I was saying, would you say that there's also a healthy way of grieving?
There's also I'm sorry,
A,
I can't.
a, a healthy way of grieving. There's also a healthy way of grieving.
Yes. There's definitely also a healthy way of breathing. A healthy way of breathing is actually giving yourself the space. I always say, give yourself the space and the grace to breathe. That's important. Give yourself the space and the grace to breathe. And that means healthy is allowing yourself to feel all the emotions that you feel. Lean into the emotions, allow yourself to feel those emotions, don't avoid those emotions. And then, actually, as you're feeling those emotions, still begin to try to do small things to be able to actually move doesn't mean get over it. But
Awesome.
yes, move does not mean
That
get
is
over
awesome. And I'm going to reset the room again. We have Carol J. Williams here, and we're having a little bitty small technical things, but we're just keeping it moving. Thank you so much. And maybe when the tape goes through, they may clean it up as we go. But we can hear you, we see you, but there's a little bit hopefully from my end that I'm okay with you hearing me as well. So I wanted to ask you uh, why. Not why, not so much why, but is I know in our culture as people of color, uh, talking about death or even trying to plan or even trying to put away for your burial Is that a hard conversation across the board, regardless of what ethnic background?
Well, many individuals, most culturally, there may be cultural barriers on how people even handle the burial of their loved one. You know, burying loved ones can be challenging for individuals for many different reasons. And it's important to know that everybody handles even the burial differently. You know, um, one of the things that individuals have the challenge at times is the saying didn't have a chance even to say bye before they even got to the place of having to actually bury the loved one. And so there are many different factors that come into play when it comes to saying goodbye and um, to the whole funeral aspect. And I think you and I had talked about this before, how maybe one individual, the individual who actually transitioned, may wanted something done for their service one way, but the person who is the griever may not have been able to provide their final wishes due to even financial restraint, and so that can cause the griever to have another heaviness on their heart, feeling like they can't really honor their loved one's request. So there are a lot of things that play into even the whole burial and the final last.
Thank you so much for saying that, because that is a beautiful conversation that we sometimes don't meet between. And just like you said, that I wanted to ask you, during the time of pandemic time, when we had COVID first, early stages coming out, or in the midst of that, we all grieved differently, meaning that we could not see our loved ones. The bodies just were stacked. They kept them for however long they had, and you could not see the bodies. Had you heard uh, in your sphere of what you do, have you heard what was that experience like for others?
I didn't. I honestly did not hear that part. I noticed some individuals definitely could not go to the funeral, and in some cases, some individuals may have been cremated because some funeral homes, were not embalming during the whole embalming pieces. So there were many factors, and then some family members definitely were not able to come in because of the whole the COVID as well. And so again, that does play a part, can definitely play a part on how individuals grieve because they can feel as if they didn't have the final chance to say their last goodbye, even
Mm.
after they transition, after the person transition.
Carol, this is such a sweet, sweet conversation, a calm, sweet, sweet conversation that I hope that will reach others. And you do share this out as well. It's a wonderful conversation. And also, I wanted to ask you, when preparing, can we prepare enough? I see people that when they love one pass, there's GoFundMe, and then you have people who, like you said, didn't get a chance to maybe have a living will or even discuss those things before they transition. So, with that being said, can we prepare enough for how we should bury our loved ones, or even have those finances to do those final wishes?
Yes, yes. There are a lot of funeral homes. I know funeral homes are offering prepaid funeral arrangements. Prepaid funeral arrangements. I do know my dad. When my mom transitioned, one of the things that he did, that he made sure that um, we both, at that point, he wasn't married, both were had everything in place, as far as at least having our plot and things that need to be taken care of. And so you can definitely do a prepaid funeral arrangements. Definitely making sure that you have life insurance policies. We don't. A lot of times we don't, as we as African Americans, just individuals. Sometimes we don't necessarily live in reality. We think that we're going to live forever and that we have time to get things in order. But now that we see how so many individuals are grieving and we have experiencing loss so quickly, that now we don't have as much time as we think we have. And so it's important to start now planning, getting life insurance uh, policies on yourself and your children. And actually also, this is important to have conversations with family members. Ask your family members while they're still living, do you have a life insurance policy? And if you do have a life insurance policy, where is the policy? Where is the policy? What's the details of what's the details of the policy? That's important to know, and that definitely would decrease some of the strain on family members when they have to prepare um, for the services and still have to really deal with all of their emotions as well.
Hmm. And you in your chapters of your book, you first started out with pain. Why did you start off with that, and what about your book that you want to share with us here about your first chapter, pain?
So when I started off with pain because we don't like to feel pain, and grief is definitely painful. And I started off by saying that grief, the pain is actually subjective. It's what the person actually says, uh, as well as how you observe. Okay, so a lot of times we can tell individuals that we may not necessarily be in pain, but our face may be saying something totally different. And so we have to be able to judge what we hear as versus what we see, and understand that with your body, when you're in pain with your body, we don't like to be in pain. We'll do something to numb the pain and to ease the pain, whether it's taking medication. And oftentimes with grief, sometimes we try to numb our pain. We try to numb our
Hmm.
pain with things. And unfortunately, the way that you deal with the pain of grief is not by trying to numb it with things, but actually trying to get into doing the grief work and doing things to help you be better able to cope with the pain. So I wanted to just give just to talk about pain. And in my first chapter, I talk about not only the pain, but the areas of grief that caused me the pain, which we often tend to think is just the death of a loved one. However, as you had mentioned, and mentioned, I was molested. I was bullied. Um, I experienced the loss of a job unexpectedly. I experienced numerous losses, not just related to the death of a loved one, that caused pain. It caused a normal reaction. It caused me to have some pain. And just how did I be made able to deal with the pain and to really maneuver through the pain was eventually coming to realize that I had to do I had to do grief work. I had to actually go to therapy. I had to actually journal. I had to actually lean into what I was feeling versus trying to numb it with anything. And anything could even mean from being a from the faith-based perspective, it could even mean trying to numb it with church or trying to numb it with work, trying to numb it with alcohol, trying to numb it with drugs, trying to numb it with food, trying to numb it even even with fantasy or going like books. Sometimes,
Hmm.
we tend to want to go into somebody else's world. So we'll know, we'll grab books, we'll grab books, we'll grab music, we'll do different things just to try to avoid it versus just really dealing with it. And it's not always a bad thing to, to read books and to do things like that. When you find that you're constantly doing it to avoid dealing with the pain, then that can become a challenge.
I'm glad that you said that because I was thinking about how, especially go back again, we as people of color, um, we are super women and not having time to grieve, and then we find ourselves uh, after some years finally able to grieve. And I'll give you an example, and we probably talked about this before. um, I realized that my brother, he was murdered in 1982 on the streets of Chicago. And so I was the one who had to identify his body. So I didn't want to go to when he was buried. And then we had too many families, so we could not all fit in the car. And so what I'm getting at is my dad passed in I'm sorry, and he brother was murdered in 82. Dad passed in 2008. And so dad, he was buried cat a corner across from where my brother was buried. Well, a long story short, my dad had the plaque and he didn't spell his name right. Neither did he want to during, now that I'm thinking probably his grieving process. He just wanted to remember it like it was, not really spelled out his name. And so I realized that when I seen my brother's burial site for the first time, and here it is 2008, and he was murdered in 82, I realized when I seen that, I started crying as if it was fresh. And for me, I would say, I don't think I buried him. I don't think I buried him. And so that was my first time burying him. Had you heard any incidents where folks are grieving years later as if it was the first
Yes, yes. And it's interesting that you brought that up because I just shared, and I've been sharing that during the holiday, it's two things that can occur. And I will be transparent. I would say for me, grieving not only the loss related to the person not being here, but grieving what once was. And so, yes, because when we never allow ourselves to grieve, something can trigger going to what you said first, something can definitely trigger emotional response. And then that's when you realize, like, wow, I never sat down with this. And then it feels like very overwhelming because now you are actually having all of the emotions that you have never expressed, from the anger, from the anxiety, from the tears, from the depression, the frustration. You're all of it because now it's like a tea kettle pot. A tea kettle pot, you put it on you have water, and when you have water, you put the flame on it and just starts boiling and boiling, and eventually what happens is that it just steam just comes out. It just comes out because the triggers have now started, and it can happen. It definitely can happen. One of the things that I really always say is this is important, and I'm going to go back to grieving what once was. It's important to understand that as much as we talk about grief and what others can experience, that grief is our own unique individual journey. And that's
time.
important, that we should never compare where we are with other individuals because it robs us. That's another thing that robs us from the opportunity to be able to grieve, to be able to express our emotions because we have not, we're trying to compare where we are with someone else. And so for some, grief happens later because I've had somebody even say due to financial problems or issues with trying to bury it, they didn't have a chance to actually grieve. And it did happen later because this was where they were. They were trying to deal with all the financial pieces. And so it's important to know that wherever you are, even now, if you're watching now or watching later, wherever you are, it's okay to be wherever you are on your journey and not to try to compare your journey to somebody else's journey or even expect that just because someone experienced this, that somebody else, that you will experience this. And so I want to talk about the grieving what was. You know, I didn't realize until I realized Thanksgiving was the challenge when you're maybe used to spending Thanksgiving with your family at the dinner table, um, and you no longer are spending that time at the dinner table with your whole complete family. So you have the
Hmm.
whole process of how the holidays normally would have been, as well as missing the loved one who's not there. So that's twofold. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the same even
yeah,
for caregiving. The same even for caregivers. We don't think
Wow.
about that as far as grief for caregivers. Grief for caregivers could be the loved one is still here, but now I'm grieving. I'm having a normal, natural response to a
Hmm.
loss because my family member is no longer functioning the way they was normally functioning. And I'm trying now to deal with my emotions related to that as well.
Hmm. You could probably better, I mean, I believe you can better help me with this. I was thinking about it as you were saying the caregivers because then I'm gonna say in a setting of if a daughter or a son or family member that is caregiver to um, that person that transition. I've seen where people not close to me, but I've heard of people saying that that was their routine, and they were so routine at taking care of that parent or whoever that was, and now they don't know what to do with themselves because that was a routine thing that they were doing. Have you heard anything about
Yes, I can say that for me. I was a caregiver for my mom. My mom had Alzheimer's. And so I was a caregiver for 3 years, 3 years. And we had a routine. And so based on that routine, it was a challenge because now I'm experiencing a normal natural response to the loss of doing something. So we never talk
that?
about that. So yes, exactly, yes. That is so true. And then this is the point. This is this can be very challenging with grieving individuals because we don't want to necessarily, we never think about this, but when we live our lives in relationships, oftentimes we lose our identity in relationships because we at
Mm-hmm.
times um, have the person be our identity, and sometimes we lose ourselves in relationships. So when now you have the person who has now no longer there, it becomes a challenge to actually even find out now who are you, especially if you have lived in their world. So I talk about that in my book, and let me just share this is how I talk about it in my book because all of my life, um, I lived for my mom. I
Mm-hmm.
lived for my mom. I lived in my mom's world. Whatever my mom wanted, that's what I did. And that stems because of also, we talk about purpose, that stems because of being rejected, abandoned. And so when my mom died, um, and we finally rectified our relationship before she died, trying to find out or just trying to maneuver and find out, okay, who am I now? Who am I outside of being my mother's caregiver? Who am I outside of doing everything my mom wanted me to do? Who am I now? And so that can be another challenge, another layer added to dealing with the normal natural response to grief. So grief can be at times complicated. Grief can be at times complicated, and and when grief is complicated with many layers, then that's definitely when, if you're having many layers, you find yourself dealing with different emotions where you just can't seem to peace. This is where it becomes important to reach out for help, professional help, because it can be complicated when you have layers and layers of things that you have to unpack to really begin to find out how to cope and how to live.
So true. I was while you were speaking, I was thinking about the different. I don't know. Maybe you thought about this, and I just kind of thought about um, the different types of death. And what I mean by that is, my brother, as I mentioned, he was murdered. So to me, that was a different type of grieving. My sister, she was ill and she passed. So for me, it was more acceptable to accept that, oh, she was sick, as opposed to he was murdered. And then you have, sickness versus murder. So do you have people in your walks or your sphere that you talk to that experience it grieving uh, differently for different situations, like, you know like I just said, those different types of death? Is it a certain severity of grief or acceptance or unacceptable.
So I wouldn't put would definitely not put a severity on it. And everybody going back to everybody grieves differently. But I will say that when it comes down to grief, that there's certain griefs that certain things that way a person transitions that people aren't allowed to talk about or discuss or feel like there's a stigma. Like suicide is a great example.
Yes, yes.
That's a great example. Suicide is a great example. There are a lot of individuals who have had death by suicide, but because of the stigma with suicide and different things and different beliefs about suicide, individuals often don't talk about it, and they don't reach out because society doesn't embrace it sometimes, or have negative connotations. And so
Hmm.
yes, yes, and and then the degree of emotions may be different with the death, or what, whereas when somebody is murdered, trying to deal not only with your emotions towards what's going on with you, but then there's the emotions with towards the person who actually committed who actually killed the individual. Yes.
Hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned that too. And the Lord really helped me with that one because my father, when my brother freshly was murdered, and we're Christian, our backdrop is Christian. And my dad, I can remember it's 11 of us with mom and dad. It was 13. I remember us being in a circle. And I was about 17 or 18 at that time, so old enough to remember this. And so I remember him saying, let's pray and let's forgive the person that killed our family member. I don't know if they did, but I did, sincerely did. And from 82 to this point, I don't have that anger like that, where I'm angry with the guy for killing my brother. And that's why I see why God said, while we were yet in our sin, so the action of what happened at that moment will cause a to put a balm of healing or that salve on there, so that you can just soak that into the wound of that unforgiveness. And so it caused me to forgive and to live a healthier grieving life, where I wasn't living the duration of my life from 17 to now 62 with anger. So it's not there. And I knew that that was God. So people may not, I'm not saying this was easy for people to do, but I experienced it where my dad, if you mess with one of his kids, he was going to retaliate. But for him to choose to walk it out with the Lord. And then I think, as an adult now, my mom, I mentioned that she is deaf. So I would think about this in my adult mind, that what if he retaliated, and then he has a wife that's deaf and he has 11 children? What would that do for his family? And that's what I think a part of that process, and a part of number one, God really orchestrated
Yeah, that's so when it comes down to, the whole forgiveness piece, and dealing with unforgiveness is important. It's really, really important. This is where God and therapy comes, God and therapy together comes into play. And is just, it's interesting we're having this conversation. Um, a book for you to read, ESP, is the Beta Satan. I think it's the Beta Satan.
that.
And in this, he talks about the spirit of offense. And I was just
Mm,
reading about forgiveness and unforgiveness, and how, from the spiritual component, just thinking about how many times God has forgiven us and given us
yes, yes.
chances, and then how much Jesus loved us, that he died for us, knowing that we would be sinners and we would keep doing the same thing over and over again. And he constantly, constantly forgives us, and
Hmm.
not give us what we rightfully deserve because we haven't obeyed him, you know. And that, and saying all of that, it takes time.
Yes.
It takes time. It takes time. We have to give ourselves, we have to give ourselves the grace and the space and be honest with ourselves and realize that this is where we are. One of the things that I've come to realize is that we're not honest with ourselves. And then,
Hmm.
even from the spiritual aspect, we're not even honest with God that this is where we are. So
Yes.
honesty plays a very important part of this. Sometimes we, even as faith-based believers, that we walk around as if we're not harboring this, you know,
So true.
and we actually are harboring it. And
Hmm.
not only the grief part, but the unforgiveness, both can have a total impact on our bodies. A
Hmm.
lot of things that we experience in our bodies, just that we never think about this. It could be related, could be, listen to this, could be, not saying is, related to the things that we're carrying that we were never intended to carry.
So true. So true.
You
I'm
know,
gonna uh, I'm gonna reset. And for those who are out there who listen and replay, or who is looking live while we're live, our guest here is Carol J. Williams, and she is a Amazon #1 bestseller and the author of Moving and Being Productive in the Midst of Loss. Could you show your book again? And our time is going out. I have another question for you. And there is the book there, guys. And do go out and buy it. It was a great help for me, to me. And there's two quick things. There is in your book how you mentioned and you said a moment ago how you were molested and how you went to those family members. So you're talking about a huge forgiveness, and you're talking about, like you said, no one believing you. So you did just demonstrate that in your book, and they would have to read it. We don't want to give it away, but I just want to highlight that right there. But I wanted to talk about this mainly is I see this throughout probably everyone's family, is when a loved one has transitioned and they really want to put them away real nice, but that's what their heart wants to do, but their finances is not saying the same thing. So you have one family member that, if you will, ran up the tab of what they wanted for the funeral expenses. And then you have one that's in reality, oh well, that is not as numb as the other person. And you have some that was probably not there for the family member that transitioned and want to kind of make up. And neither of those two scenarios have the money to do it, but the one who is more sober is saying no. Not no, you can't do this, but let's be real. We don't have it to do this. I know what the deceased person said they would like to have, but there is no finances. Have you ever had someone in your sphere that dealt with that or even had those conversations?
I have not, I have not heard that. I mean, I have not myself come across any of that. But actually, what, well, her Ashlyn Price. Shout out to Ashlyn Price. That's another book. I have to get her name, her book. She talks about that from the perspective of not being able to. That's how she became a financial literacy coach. I believe that's how we say.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
because her brother died. And when her brother
Mhm.
died, she realized financially, and I'm sharing this because she said this and she talks about this in her book. Financially, she wasn't able to give her brother or could even contribute to her brother trying to bury him because he left them in so
Mhm.
much debt. So yes, that's a great example that I did hear that from
Mhm.
her aspect of it. And she talks about that
Mhm.
even in showing people, preparing people, and wanting people to be financial so they would not become in that be in that situation.
Awesome. So we're at the end of our conversation. This has been a great conversation with you, Carol, and also tell folks where they can reach you at. Do swipe and share this And then when I share it with you in the comment section, you can put those two books that you were talking about. Um, the one about the forgiveness and the one you just spoke about. You tell them about that. But tell where folks can reach you at and where can they buy your book.
So individuals can reach me email. Well, actually, my website, iCareSolutions.website. iCareSolutions.website is my website. And there is a tab there at the top that says contact. You can hit the tab and reach out to me. That's the best way to reach out to me. I'm actually also on Instagram, and I did not write all this down. I apologize in advance,
That's okay. That's
but
okay.
I'm gonna try. I'm trying to say it's our lowercase I underscore care solutions 5. And that's IG, and I'm Carol Williams on Facebook.
Well, thank you so much. And like I say, when I share this with you, you can write those different things that we talked about. This has been amazing, and we look forward to more of your books. And we thank you for this moment in time. And have a wonderful night. But before you go, I'm going to shut down with you. I'm just going to tell the folks out there thank you again for watching, for sharing, for looking at this moment. And this is a great conversation with Carol J. Williams. We're talking about grief. It's a conversation that uh, regardless of what background or regardless of what ethnicity, that sometimes it's hard to talk about. And sometimes it is just not a place to have it. You can't find no place to really do it, but just to do it. And so we thank you for being here. Do go out and get her book. When did you write this book? I know, I think it's about a year or two now.
3 years. It's been 3 years. It's been
Three
3.
years? Well, maybe it was a year that I had seen it and then
Yes,
2 years because I didn't.
yes,
I probably met you the second year of your book being out, and it's 2 years now for me, but really 3 years of actual
yes.
review. So thank you so much for writing an amazing book. And thank you guys for being here. Again, I'm Ellen Sutter of ESP Presents an ESP Book Chat, which is our book club. You guys have an amazing night. To you, thank you so much for having this story. And do share, share, continue to have it out and I'll continue to share this. And I am so excited of you being on our top 20 list with an amazing book. It's not a novel, but at the same time, it's something that we have to visit. Have an amazing night, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Bye bye.